The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, and welcome to today's ASPPH Presents webinar. My name is Monica Statler, and I am the staff lead for the ASPPH Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Before we start our webinar, I'd like to review a few housekeeping details. At any time during the webinar, here's a slide of it. At any time of the webinar, you can type your question into the questions box, which you can find on the toolbar on the right side of your computer screen, as shown here. We will address the questions during the question and answer session at the end of the presentation. And if you've not already done so, please be sure to put your phones on mute to eliminate any background noises. Now to begin our webinar, I am pleased to introduce our moderator for today, Dr. Cheryl Hilton, Dean of the College of Global Public Health, Professor of Public Health Policy and Management of the College of Global Public Health at New York University, NYU. Dean Hilton is also the chair of the ASPPH Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Dean Hilton, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Today's webinar is sponsored, as you know, by ASPPH Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Through this webinar, we hope to bring attention to factors that influence diversity and inclusion efforts on campuses, including models in schools and programs of public health. Our speakers will present strategies and promising practices that advance a diverse student, staff, and faculty pipeline. In addition, we will provide an opportunity at the end for discussion, questions, and answers among participants and presenters to share and identify practices that are essential to improving the climate for diversity within our campuses. I am delighted to have with us today 3 representatives from ASPPH member institutions. We're thrilled to have all 3 of them. First to speak will be Melody Goodman, Associate Professor of Biostatistics in the College of Global Public Health at New York University. Dr. Goodman will present the findings on the 2017 ASPPH survey, Diversity and Inclusion in Public Health Education. Then we will hear from Colleen Cipriani, Assistant Dean for Inclusive Excellence at the UNC Gillings Global School of Public Health. Dr. Cipriani will present on practices aimed at recruitment and retention of a diverse faculty. We will then hear from Tony Tybo, Student Services Lead for the Masters of Public Health Program at Cornell University. Ms. Tybo will speak on student recruitment and retention efforts. Joining her will be a current student from Cornell, Dr. Andrani Martin. First, we will hear from my colleagues at NYU, at NYU, Dr. Melody Goodman.
Good morning. I'm going to talk briefly about the 2017 Diversity and Inclusion Survey. The purpose of this survey was to identify efforts to achieve diversity and inclusion within ASPPH member CEEF accredited schools and programs of public health, as well as within the larger university or college that the programs or schools reside in. The survey asks about the following organizational units: the public health program, including the academic unit where the public health program reports, the School of Public Health, if there's a school, and also at the university or the college level. The ASPPH Diversity and Inclusion Committee developed the survey, and it was sanctioned for distribution to ASPPH members by the ASPPH Data Advisory Committee. The survey was administered online via SurveyMonkey and was distributed to the primary contact, that being the dean or the program director of the ASPPH member. Respondents were either the recipient of the survey or someone that they designated to respond. There was 1 response per institution. The instrument was open from February 27th to April 28th, 2017, and had 25 questions on organizational structure related to diversity, initiatives for students, faculty, and staff, responses to demographic changes and incidences, partnerships and promising practices, and also challenges. There were a total of 61 schools and programs that responded to the survey. We used mixed methods analysis to analyze the data. First, we did a comparison of responders to non-responders. So like I said, 61 out of the 100 and so members of ASPPH responded to the survey. So we looked at member type, whether they're public or private. We also looked at the percentages of faculty by gender and race, similar to students. And we also looked at how long the program had or school had been in existence and faculty size. ASPPH did a descriptive analysis of survey responses, and me and my team really worked on trying to analyze the qualitative open-ended questions. Based upon open-ended responses, we created theme lists for each question based on the similarities and differences across responses, and we created indicator variables for any theme that had more than 5 responses. When we compared responders to non-responders, we found no significant differences in the percentage, in the gender or the racial ethnic distribution of faculty. However, it's important to note that several of the racial ethnic variables did have small sample sizes. There were also no significant differences found in terms of student gender. However, we did find a significant difference in the percentage of Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders, although both responders and non-responders have less than 1%. There was also a significant difference found in the percentage of foreign students between responders and non-responders, but the significance did not hold up when we did non-parametric testing. So there was a higher proportion of schools that responded to the survey, but there was no significant difference between public and private responders and non-responders. We did also see many of the responders were older institutions or programs, so the average age of the program was higher among respondents than among non-responders, but we didn't see any significant differences in terms of faculty size or student size. So one of the first questions that was asked in the survey was sort of, what is the highest position at your university or college that's primarily responsible for diversity and inclusion? And the majority, over 65%, said that there was a vice president, a vice chancellor, vice provost, or similar level at their university or college that was responsible for diversity and inclusion. The majority of respondents reported the existence of a university-wide task force or some similar group focused on diversity and inclusion. And really, they had a lot of similar charges. One of the ones that we saw was common was committees and councils to facilitate the initiatives that the task force was sort of recommending. They were also responsible for equal opportunity across campus. Some of the task force were really focused on attraction and retention of talented and diverse faculty, staff, and students. We also saw that about 6 respondents reported renewal of policies to address uprising diversity and inclusion challenges, and an even smaller percentage to foster collaboration across schools to create support networks for inclusion. And then we also, similar to how we asked at the university level, there was also a question about what was the highest title position in your school or program that was primarily responsible for diversity. And here we see about 25% say associate assistant or vice dean or some similar position. And then another quarter or so are saying that the dean is responsible for that. And then it goes down from there, director, diversity committee chair, etc. So student.
We apologize for that. Okay, go on, Melody. I think it's cleared up.
Okay. So does your school or program have a task force or similar group focused on diversity and inclusion? Like I said before, we looked at this whether it was a school or a program, and we see that most schools of public health, about 80% of those who responded reported yes, and then a little over half of the programs of public health reported having a task force at the school level or the program level. And in terms of what the charge of this task force would be, most respondents said to increase diversity or to support diversity in a strong cultural climate. And then fewer respondents talked about collaboration across campus. They were also asked what the strategic areas that the School of Programs diversity and inclusion efforts are addressing, and almost half talked about an inclusive climate. About a third talked about recruitment efforts and curriculum, and a little bit less than a quarter talked about community engagement or service. When we looked at student-focused initiatives, in the survey, they were given a bunch of options that they could check. Most institutions, as you can see, over 85% of all the ones we have said yes, that activity was in place in terms of efforts to recruit diverse students, student organizations, resource for diverse students, efforts to create and sustain a welcoming climate, workshops, presentations, panel discussions, or events focused on diversity and inclusion, retention initiatives, and also orientation programs. Similarly, for faculty-focused initiatives, we see that over 80% of those responding said each of these items were in place, including efforts to recruit diverse faculty, efforts to create and sustain a welcoming climate, professional development focused on diversity and inclusion, retention initiatives, and resources for diverse communities. And then similarly, they were also asked about initiatives for staff. And again, this is the one where we see some of the lower percentages, but most of the respondents say most of these things are in place in terms of efforts to recruit diverse staff and efforts to create and sustain a welcoming environment. The ones that are sort of in the 70% area of professional development focused on diversity and inclusion for staff, resource for diverse communities, and retention initiatives for diverse staff. And so I really have to thank a bunch of people: Cheryl Hilton, who is the chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, Craig Blakely, who is the chair of the Data Advisory Committee, all the members of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, several staff members at ASPPH, and then a special thanks to two students that worked with me, Salifa Joseph and Carmen Marazi, who really helped analyze those open-ended responses so that we can get a fuller picture of the data. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melody. Terrific job. And now we will hear from Colleen Cipriani from UNC Chapel Hill.
Thanks, Dean Hilton. So I just want to move quickly through some definitions so that we can all be on the same page. I found that it works best when you get these definitions out the way. So when I talk about diversity, I am talking about all the ways in which we show up anywhere, but particularly obviously on our campuses. So what makes us different, right? So diversity is about our differences. Inclusion is about how we all get along. There's been considerable work at this point on how and why increased diversity adds to the learning environment and is beneficial to college students. And so what we have yet to figure out, I believe, is how do we encourage learning across differences so that our students and our faculty and staff members can actually reap the benefits that the diversity we're all working so hard to increase brings. So okay, trying to advance here. So when we talk about culture and climate, when I talk about culture and climate, this picture of the tree is the one that really works for me, because a lot of times people spend much time up here trying to figure out how to change the climate so that we can make it more hospitable to the diverse individuals we are seeking to bring into our schools and programs, but we don't think enough about what is it about our institutional culture, our traditions, our beliefs, our values, our history, our customs, that's making it difficult to change the climate. The institutional climate is rooted in the institutional culture, and if you want to make long-standing changes, we have to address the culture of our institutions. So inclusive excellence is a term I really like using. It's in my job title. It goes way beyond diversity. It's a term that was coined by the AACU, Association of American Colleges and Universities, to talk about how we create spaces for primarily our students to have the high quality learning experiences that they deserve and that they're paying for, and we do so in a way that addresses each and every single policy and practice that exists at our institutions. So obviously this is going way beyond talking about how do we do things to increase recruitment and retention, because retention is directly related to the policies and practices we do or do not have in place. Really quickly want to reiterate for some, educate others, the differences between equality and equity. We use those two words interchangeably a lot in higher education and in the country, but they do not mean the same thing. I love using this figure because you can get it really quickly. Equality is about giving everyone the same thing and expecting them to be successful and hoping they'll be successful. As you can see from the diagram on the right, everybody gets a box of equal size, and we have exhibited equality. Equity is about giving individuals what they need to be successful. And I would argue that as schools and programs of public health, once we have hired a staff or a faculty member or admitted a student, then we should each feel that it is incumbent upon us, the schools and the programs, to give individuals what they need to be successful. I mean, beyond some parameters, right? So obviously there will be situations where we cannot, but I do think that there's room for us to try much harder to be equitable and focus less on equality. Liberation, I'm not even going to address because we are nowhere near liberation, which is removing the barrier to begin with. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our structure based on what Dr. Goodman presented, so that you can take a close look at what one institution would have said in that survey. So at the university level, we have Felicia Washington, who is our Vice Chancellor for Workforce Strategy, Equity, and Engagement. And we call her the Chief People Person, and she's in the red blouse there. And then we have our Chief Diversity Officer, Senior Diversity Officer, who is Jirume Alexander. She's also the Associate Vice Chancellor and reports to Felicia Washington. So that office Rume's office runs a lot of professional development around diversity and inclusion. They also run K through 12 programs with an eye to increasing recruitment into our undergraduate programs here at UNC Chapel Hill. They offer staff consulting. So for instance, they have a staff member who does implicit bias training and will be doing so in our School of Global Public Health later this fall and next spring. They run difficult dialogues here on this campus. It's called Carolina Conversations, where once a month they invite students to come in and talk about a difficult topic that's affecting their lives and affecting diversity and inclusion on our campus. They have diversity awards, and they convene people like me in the schools and colleges who serve as diversity liaisons to talk about ways in which we can collaborate to help improve the climate on campus. So here in the Gillings School, just to give a little background, we have been working on this for a long time. The 2010 strategic plan renewed a diversity and inclusion commitment that led to a task force that produced a report. The report had 13 recommendations. 3 of them focused on increasing diversity and inclusion in the curriculum, 5 of them on recruitment and retention for students, faculty, and staff, and 5 of them were around organizational excellence for our school. One of the last 5 included creating and filling my position, the Assistant Dean of Inclusive Excellence, and the task force morphed last year into a group that is called the Diversity and Inclusion Working Group. Some of the things that were done as a part of the working group were to revise our diversity and inclusion leadership statement, which is available on the web. The working group has also coordinated support of many student activist movements in our school, including the Black Lives Matter movement and the hashtag #MeToo movement. We host a National Health Equity Research webcast every year. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see the topic of this fall's webcast that occurred on Friday, September 28th, and is available for viewing online. It's archived. And we also host, and this is a completely student-run event, a minority health conference every spring in February. And next spring, it will be the 40th anniversary of these conferences. And I'm talking about these particular bullet points because these sort of activities are very important when you're trying to recruit a diverse student, staff, and of course, faculty body. We are looking to see commitment on the part of the school, and having these outlets are ways in which a school or program can show that commitment. It also positively affects the climate. So I think that we in higher ed have not done as well as we should and could have in terms of looking at the climate into which we are recruiting diverse faculty, and also the climate in which we hope to retain them. So our D&I working group is currently going to be restructured, but and we're working on what that will look like, but the work will still be there'll still be a lot of work to do, and we will organize our work around the themes of nurturing an inclusive, supportive climate for everyone. This really, I think, is important, certainly in terms of increasing diversity amongst faculty, but also retaining them. Strategic areas that we're going to be looking at, again, at the top of the list is an inclusive climate. We're also going to be looking at ways in which we can continue to support diversity and inclusion within the curriculum. Some of this is being driven by CEF requirements, but some of it is also being driven because our students want and expect that. So I've heard loudly from current students since I have been here since February of this year, and that is that they hope and they expect that their faculty members are able to have some of these more difficult conversations as it relates to the content of their syllabus. And we have several faculty members who have said they would like more support in that area, hence number 3. So we are working on addressing those, the top 3 of those: inclusive climate, curriculum support, and then faculty support. Here's a picture of my department, the Gillings Public Health Leadership Program. And as I said, just to reiterate, the strong faculty focused initiatives that we are looking forward to working on for the rest of this school year and for the upcoming year is supporting our faculty in creating a more diverse curriculum. We're going to be providing implicit bias trainings, specifically for faculty who want it, but also for faculty who are going to be serving on search committees and on our admissions committees. Sorry about that, moving backwards instead of forwards. Finally, I want to talk about the Silent Sam effect. So Dean Hilton mentioned earlier about being able to discuss being able to discuss things that can affect how we seek to increase diversity and inclusion on our campuses. So it would be remiss of me to not talk about Silent Sam, who is a Confederate statue. You see his photo there on the left that has stood on the campus of UNC Chapel Hill for over 100 years. So in August, the day before classes starting, that statue was toppled. So on the right, you see the base as it remains. Now, Silent Sam has been a source of student and faculty and staff protests for many years. The picture on the uppermost left is one of students in orange. That was from last year. I'm sure if I went back further, I could find more protests. The picture next to it is from the day that he was toppled. Picture on the bottom left shows what it looked like immediately after the toppling, and then we've since had on our campus protests by both sets of individuals who are the one group or collection of groups that are upset that he was toppled, and then counter protesters who support the toppling and do not support his being returned to campus. So there's been a lot of this in the news. So what I want to say about that in terms of how it affects individuals like myself who work here, and also I work in a position where it's very important for me to be able to recruit diverse populations to campus, is that what we have decided to do as a campus under the leadership of our fearless leaders. You see Chancellor Folt there, and then Dean Barbara Reimer, who's Dean of the School of Public Health, is to focus on a sense of belonging. So if you want to be a member of the UNC Chapel Hill community, regardless of who you are, to be able to have a conversation with your family, with a staff, with a faculty member, with a peer about what that looks like in the face of Silent Sam protests. Many campuses have struggled with the removal of Confederate statues in the past, and I think this will be ongoing, and it's up to each campus to figure out what that looks like for them. We are still figuring it out. But we have many people, including our leadership, that understand the issues as it affects diverse communities and are willing to work with us to address these. And I think that's what I have to say about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colleen. And now we will hear from Tony Tebow from Cornell.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tony Tebow, and I serve in the role of Program Manager for the Mph Program at Cornell University. I answer to the pronouns she, her, and hers. In my position at Cornell, I identify admission and recruitment strategies and best practices that will support the public health program to meet the performance goals of the institution.
Just for the presenters.
Andreina Martin is a second-year public health student, is joining me on the webinar today and will answer any questions concerning her learning experience, perceptions, and beliefs of the campus climate here at Cornell from the perspective of an underrepresented minority student.
Oh, okay. So Tony. She may not be able to see it if she's on.
She also needs control.
The purpose of today's presentation is to identify and briefly explain the leadership attributes required to implement our strategic diversity plan effectively, to share the status of Cornell's diversity and inclusion initiatives and activities at the university and within the program, and reflect and discuss the program's innovative approaches to create a sustained model for diversity and inclusion. The Mph program was established in 2016 and is a cross-campus program involving multiple colleges and departments. The program is administratively managed by the College of Veterinary Medicine. Our inaugural 2017 cohort consisted of 15 students divided between two concentration tracks, epidemiology, infectious disease, and food systems for health. Cornell joined the Association of Schools and Public Health Programs and gained access to SOFAs in fall 2017. There was an 80% increase in our enrollment from year 1 to 2, and our retention rate is 100%. We acknowledge public health outcomes show disparities across demographics related to race, income, education, and geography. With a commitment to help reduce disparities, the Mph program places equity at the core of teaching, engagement, and recruiting. 33% of our students are underrepresented minorities, including 19% who are first-generation college students. Their academic successes and personal development is our priority. Recruiting a diverse student population seems to be much easier in comparison to retaining one. Therefore, in my role as student services and admissions lead, I keep my ears wide open. I provide a safe space for students to share their needs, issues, and concerns, and then collectively we do our best to respond. Vygotsky's sociocultural theory emphasizes that social interaction is critical to the development of cognition. Much of what we do in finding solutions to our diversity challenges stems from this theory because education is a culture aspect that describes student groups. We absolutely recognize here at Cornell that our students need to be able to see themselves in their teachers and their mentors, and we're actively trying to recruit diversity in our program among staff and faculty. This is aggressively supported by the CPM leadership, HR, and the university provost. The social emotional learning model emphasizes the importance of motivational orientations, self-regulated learning strategies, and social interpersonal abilities in facilitating academic performance. This framework acknowledges students who become more self-aware and confident regarding their learning perform better in school. Student characteristics are essential to understanding as they both illustrate academic progression, whether it be by way of transmission or guidance. Therefore, it is essential that educators, administrators, and student affairs leaders identify ways to channel information to URM students in different environments and modules. Peer-to-peer teaching, cues to action, and hands-on learning are all great strategies for cognitive development. Requiring all of our students to participate in co-curricular activities provides the opportunities for student and professional development. Collaboration and empowering are two variables that assist with building a positive workplace climate, culture, and experience, and are very much positive descriptors of the participative leadership demonstrated by our administration. Under a shared governance, our leadership team collaborates with faculty, staff, and students to create a campus climate that promotes diversity and inclusion while developing a learning environment that harvests a sense of belonging for each student. We are committed and compassionate about making sure the Mph program is successful and that the student experience is a positive one. So let's talk about campus climate. To treat others courteously remains a top priority for the Mph program. That starts doing recruitment. Getting to know the applicant via email and phone calls is the first stage to establishing a relationship that will develop throughout the program. The student services team coordinates a 3-day leadership and team building focused orientation facilitated by staff members from the Cornell Outdoor Education, which is designed to break down barriers in communication and create a culture that is supportive and respectful of every student. After the 3-day orientation, we celebrate the new formal relationships at our annual meet and greet at the home of the program director. Faculty, staff, students, parents, significant others are all invited to attend this family-oriented event. We recognize a student's academic performance and learning outcomes rely on the development of positive relationships between faculty and students inside and outside of the classroom setting, and therefore identifying ways to create a sense of belonging and respect will motivate students to want to perform well in school. This encouraged our associate program director, who is the faculty member of the public health leadership course, to integrate the intergroup dialogue into the curriculum. This project is an academic initiative grounded in theory and practice that creates community across difference through dialogue. The course teaches how to use your voice. Additionally, the CPM offers monthly diversity seminars at lunchtime.
I'll send another message.
Research has indicated that there remain gaps in degree attainment between white and non-white students. To close this 16% gap, in college graduation. There needs to be more emphasis on other exposures to college outside of early exposure. Finding a solution to close the gap is relevant. As research has indicated, nearly 2/3 of the 46.8 billion jobs opening in the next decade will require some form of post-secondary education. Our student population represents the values that have shaped Cornell, an institution where any person can find instruction in any study. Social justice in higher education assures every student is reaching his or her full potential. Our students come from different cultures, academic and career backgrounds. We have pharmacists, educators, public health practitioners, medical doctors. Each one of these students deserve an opportunity to receive an education in an environment that advocates for equity. The Mph program is committed to establishing guidelines, researches, and programs that initiate a pathway for equity and equality. To close educational gaps, we have implemented scholarships, the 3-day student orientation, integrated the intergroup dialogue into our curriculum, we host group advising, and we provide opportunities for co-curricular milestones with nonprofit organizations who serve underserved communities. Over a 2-year time span, we have provided 17 URAM students with financial scholarships. An example of a scholarship application is included in this presentation. We realize that our small cohort size allows us to practice and teach differently here at Cornell. However, the Mph program team believes advancing a diverse student population towards inclusive excellence is a goal that is attainable for any size program or school of public health. We differ only by our strategies and our effort.
Tony, excuse us.
I'm sorry, Tony, to interrupt. We've been getting quite a bit of background noise, and it seems to be getting worse on your end.
Is that better?
That's a little better.
We're at the end now, though, and I think we have one more slide. And so then Tony can mute her line and just open it up when she's responding to a question.
That would be fine. I do acknowledge, like to make some acknowledgement to the Mph team. Dr. Travis, Jen, and Josh, and our student Andreina Martin is on the call to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you all. So we're now moving into the Q&A section, and I'm just moving through my own notes here that I reorganized. Do we have any questions that have come in through the line before I get started?
Dean Hilton, we're receiving a few questions, but if you want to go ahead and start with the one that you've identified, and then we can go to the questions as people are writing them in.
Okay, terrific. So we'll start with a question for Melody. From your work examining diversity in public health faculty, you report an increase of minority faculty. However, the increase is not heterogeneous across racial and ethnic backgrounds. From the survey, what are some of the more successful policies or programs for recruiting and retaining minority faculty members?
So I think that's definitely a challenging question to answer, mainly because the survey was more descriptive, and so we don't really know what programs produce what outcomes, and most of the institutions reported doing most of the things, so it's hard to interrogate what exactly is producing those outcomes. But I think from our presenters, we can see that there's some standard methods that work across all racial groups, and I think we just need to think about making sure that when we're thinking about diversity, we're thinking about it across all racial and ethnic groups, sexual orientation, gender identities, etc.
Okay, and then just a follow-up question to that, Melody. I know because I've seen the data. Are there any particular groups for which you think schools of public health need to work harder? Obviously, we need to work harder on everything, but does anything jump out of the data?
So I think definitely Native Americans, Hawaiian natives, and Pacific Islanders, but also African Americans, are, I think, the two groups where we're not doing as well. We seem to be making some progress in terms of Hispanics, although that is also a heterogeneous group, and Asians, another heterogeneous group. They seem to be making bigger gains in terms of the percentage of faculty that they represent, whereas in the last 20 years, African Americans and Native American percentages have been pretty stagnant.
Okay, well, that's a very good point, and probably, implies some actions on our part. For Colleen, recently there have been a number of examples challenging free expression across college campuses, such as posters or social media posts that are racist. Thoughts on how we as leaders within our schools can create safe environments for all students while still promoting free expression?
Yes, so I think in order to address some of this, is this two. I'm gonna point to two things that I feel are important. One is related to the first question, and that is increasing the diversity amongst our faculty and also our staff, right? So these students will have a diverse group of people that they can go to for support. I think that in this era of free speech and some of the things that students are seeing on their social media outlets, that we're going to need to support them. And for some students, that will mean a lot of support, such as the kind that that are offered through our psychological counseling services. Each of us has some variant, I believe, of CAPS. Some students will need to be referred there, but some students may just need to sit down with a like-minded faculty or staff member with whom they feel safe. So someone that can create a safe space for that student, whatever that means for the individual, and have a conversation. Many students just can't even identify a place for that in their schools and programs, and I think that's something that we need to address. It also means that it becomes even more important to fill these gaps that Dr. Goodman talked about. And if I could just add, one of the things that many of our campuses, in relation to the diversifying faculty piece, one of the things that many of our campuses have is money, so funds available maybe in the office of the provost or wherever, centrally, to help diversify our faculty body. And I think that we in public health need to be very aggressive about identifying such funds and going after them. I can say that we have done so here at UNC Chapel Hill. So, being able to tap into those funds so that you can provide a package to bring in specifically more diverse faculty members to your school or program, I think is very important. And we shouldn't leave any money on the table in this effort. So I'd just like to add that.
Okay, thank you very much. And a question for Tony. The results of the survey indicate that our schools and programs are partnering with local communities in ways that model inclusiveness. What tips can you offer to strengthen outreach efforts to engage community partners? Tony, did you hear? I know you're probably trying to unmute yourself. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to you, Monica, and if Tony comes back on the line, she can jump in and answer that question.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Dean Hilton. So we have a question here, and this is back to Colleen Cipriani. Regarding the current initiatives at Gillings that have to deal with faculty and diversity and inclusion, for example, having them be better equipped to have difficult conversations in the classroom, what ways do you incentivize faculty to participate in these initiatives? My second question is, regarding the diversity and inclusion work group, now task force, how do you keep momentum up and keep faculty, students, and staff involved year after year?
Both good questions. Okay, so let me answer the second question first, if that's okay. I think being able to pause and celebrate successes is very important, and now I'm speaking about my work not just here at Gillings, which is brand new, but 20 years of working in this space in higher education. That actually does a lot for individual sort of excitement and to keep people motivated. There has to be a balance between we're working really hard, but we pause to celebrate key successes, and so I think that's important for keeping motivation up. There should also be incentives, I think, was part of the first question. So making sure that individuals are thanked for their work in ways that they want to be thanked, right? So my immediate thought is not everybody wants a plaque for their wall or desk. Some people love that, and that's all they need, and they're happy. But plaques sometimes don't do it for certain individuals. So figuring out what is incentivizing to the groups of people that you're working with and incentivizing them in that way is key. And sometimes it's tougher to figure out what that looks like. So one of the things that I would love to be able to figure out is how can we thank staff by giving them like a day off. And so we haven't figured that out yet, and I don't even know if it's possible because I'm still wrapping my head around all UNC Chapel Hill policies. But I do know if it's possible, that would be a great reward for many people. Will love that and would prefer that over a plaque or something for their desk. In terms of, I'm sorry, can you remind me of the first question? I just want to make sure I hit it correctly.
Yes, so it said regarding the current initiative.
Monica, are you still there?
My apologies, I was on mute. Colleen, the first question was regarding the current initiatives at Gillings that have to deal with faculty and diversity and inclusion. For example, having them to be better equipped to have difficult conversations in the classroom. What ways do you incentivize faculty to participate in these initiatives?
Okay, so we are in the process so we're currently talking about launching our own version of diversity awards to supplement what is happening at the campus level. So I mentioned in the talk that we have university-wide diversity awards. Actually, one of our faculty here at Gillings won it for last academic year, won one of those university-wide awards. But we would like to institute awards at the school level. So that is TBA, it's coming. And I think, again, incentivizing faculty in the way that is important. So should this be a question that we ask during annual meetings with the department chairs? And should this go towards one's promotion? Should it count towards one's pay raise? These are conversations that I am having with individuals here at Gillings, and some of these things are harder to put into place than others, but I am heartened by the fact that we're willing to have these conversations, because at the root of the question is, yes, we do need to figure out a way to keep faculty incentivized and engaged, because without them, these initiatives will fall flat.
Great. Thank you, Colleen. And we also have another question, and this can be directed to any of our panelists today. The question is, what is your view on the current controversy about trigger warnings, and what connection do you see, if any, of this issue with the inclusion of diverse students? Does anybody want to volunteer to take that one? I don't know. Tony,
This is Colleen.
Okay. Hi, Colleen.
I mean, I can provide an answer to that I think might be helpful. We had some students who expressed concern about how some of the #MeToo conversations were being brought up and discussed in class, and they just had a conversation with the faculty member about it, and he very wisely decided that in order to maintain a safe space for all students in his classroom. And first of all, I want to, really applaud him for even trying to have these conversations, because they're not easy, and many faculty members may not even want to engage in this way. But he tried to, and when he spoke to the students about it, was what was decided, and I believe this is the correct decision, so hopefully this helps the questioner, is that for topics that may trigger students, he is going to send an email out to the class and say to them, at our next meeting, here's what I'm going to do for the last 10 minutes. So we'll finish what we what's on the what's in the syllabus for that day, and then for the last 10-15 minutes, whatever is the time, I'll be talking about this topic. Students who are not comfortable are allowed to leave. And so I think in this way, he is continuing to address the need for some students to have this conversation in a facilitated safe space, while allowing students who, and there could be multiple reasons, don't want to be a part of that discussion, to leave. I think that was a very smart solution to the issue. And so I offer that to the questioner.
Okay. Thank you very much, Colleen. And Tony, I'm trying to unmute you to give you, there we go, to give you an opportunity to respond. If you'd like to add to that, Tony?
Yes, and are you guys able to hear me better?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Awesome. So I wanted to first go back and speak on the question about community engagement. I believe you brought to the forefront because that's actually a very integral part of our diversity and inclusion initiatives here at Cornell. And so what we try to do is actually place a lot of emphasis on the value that they add, not only to the program, but to the Ithaca community. So oftentimes we bring in our community partners and stakeholders to actually complement instruction in the classroom. I think that offers a mutual benefit to both the students, instructors, organizations, and the community partners to show the value that they add, not only for practice experience, but on the didactic part as well. And so secondly, if I could hear the other question, I may or may not have anything to add, but I most definitely would try.
Great. Okay, thank you, Tony. And Melody or Dean Hilton, do you have anything to add?
Not really, other than it is a very complicated issue.
Yes, of course. Okay, then we'll move on to another question, and I'm going to address this to Adriana Martin, our student who's on the phone or on the call. The question, well, it states that Cornell seems to have instituted many initiatives to their program and providing a welcoming environment. What feedback do you have as a student in terms of the effectiveness of these efforts at Cornell? Adriana?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, thank you for this question. I think as a Latina student at Cornell and in this inaugural program, it's been a lot of trial and error of sorts. And I find that the support that my Mph, the academic program I'm in, gives me in sort of spreading my wings in other on-campus activities has really helped. And so in having that flexibility for me to explore the Latino Graduate Student Coalition, for example, which I serve as the co-president of at Cornell, has been extremely beneficial because it brings in these other perspectives that I can then share with my classmates as the only Latina in my cohort. So I appreciate what the Mph program at Cornell has been able to do in allowing me to be, amongst other things, this co-president, or to engage with the Latin American Studies program on campus. And I think in that way, it's sort of influenced a lot of what I bring to the classroom and the conversations with my peers, I should say, based on the other ongoings on campus. So that's, I applaud the Mph program, and especially Tony, for being open to who I am and allowing me to be a part of other ongoings.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Adraina. And our next question.
We get disconnected there.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Adraina. I appreciate that response. And also to all of our panelists, we have a question. If you can speak to any ways that you successfully changed your physical space to support inclusiveness, such as gender-inclusive restrooms, spiritual space, etc. If so, can you also share how you funded these physical space projects?
Can I share, again, as a student at Cornell, and maybe Tony can speak to how this was, the logistic behind it, but in our first year, last year, after a number of incidences that happened on the Cornell campus, the Mph program put up posters saying things like the difference between equity and inclusion and sort of explaining it in that way, like this presentation did today. But also Black Lives Matters, several professors doing this. And that in itself, for me, feels like it's then an inviting space because I know this community is welcome here. And this was in response to things that had happened on campus. So maybe Tony can speak more to how that went about, but I think it's sort of really just putting a plaque on the door was one way of going about this.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. There were quite a few initiatives that were directed actually from the president's office regarding inclusivity and diversity, as well as addressing some other inclusion type initiatives. So that was more of just team planning and revamping and rephrasing of our forwarding that diversity and initiative movements. The diversity task force is on the forefront of a lot of the newly implemented strategies that we have in place, addressing various concepts that I really can't go into detail because we're still kind of in the early planning of that. But a lot of conversation takes place on Cornell campus when we're talking about diversity and inclusion. And we're really just trying to be more proactive than reactive in addressing those concerns.
Okay, are there any further questions?
No, I think we can go ahead and wrap up the call. Dean Hilton, I will first say that we do have a list of questions that you all have submitted. Just to let you know that as soon as the webinar is over, we will be emailing all of you a copy of the slide deck, so you will have access to those. And we will also be providing you with the survey analysis, which is available only to ASPPH members. So those of you who are on the call, who are ASPPH members, we will provide access to the survey results also. We will be emailing you those. So Dean Hilton, you can take it from there.
Right, thank you so much. I hope that you found today's presentation to be informative. Please be sure to complete your webinar evaluation so that ASPPH may continue to meet the needs of our members. I also encourage you to attend the ASPPH annual meeting that will be held March 20th through the 22nd in Arlington, Virginia, where there will be a number of sessions on a range of diversity and inclusion topics. I want to thank our speakers again today, Melody, Colleen, and Tony. Thank you for sharing your time and insights with us. And thanks to all of you who are participated in joining today's webinar. Have a wonderful day.
Mm-hmm.